Hi, this is Noma Dimitri from the Alpine Garden. It is spring, and all over the world, wherever you go, you will see something like this, a nice little tree full of wonderful white or pinkish or whiter pink little blossoms. Otherwise, the tree is bare. There are no leaves at all on it. They're just these little blossoms. This happens to be this particular tree here with such beautiful little blossoms as you can see here, happens to be an almond tree. But it could be just as easily be a cherry tree or an apple tree or an apricot tree, because they all follow the same principle. The principle is this: after the long cold winter where the tree loses all of its leaves, at some point in the spring, like a miracle, almost the same date every spring, um, this otherwise dead looking piece of wood produces a splendor of flowers, of usually this kind of colors. It's true for the cherry, the apple, the almond, and the apricot, and many other ones. They all have the same profile. So we're going to try to understand why it does that and why this makes evolutionary sense. From the face of it, this tree is actually putting itself under tremendous strain. Since November, it has lived without any leaves at all. This means it has had absolutely no photosynthesis at all, no energy from the sun at all, nothing. It has to have been living on its own resources, whatever they may be. So after this long period from November to practically May of 6 April, let's say April, of about 6 months of absolutely having almost nothing to eat because there are no leaves again, and trees eat sun more than anything else. They drink water, they eat sun, and they take some macronutrients from the soil. So it has had none of this energy. This thing suddenly in the spring, after 6 months of being hungry and starving actually, what does it do? Instead of making leaves, which are mouths to eat energy from the sun, it makes flowers. And in order to make these flowers, it's going to spend a lot of energy to do that because it's a lot of flowers, and we have no energy. So it's going to spend all of this energy to make flowers instead of leaves. And then, as we know, at some point the flowers will fall and the tree will make leaves, and then these leaves will start photosynthesizing. So, all of a sudden, finally, after 6 months of starving, the tree will start getting energy. And then we know eventually that wherever we have one of these little flowers, we will eventually, sometime in the summer or the fall, depending on which of these trees we're talking about, for the almond, it's going to be sometime in the fall. At some point, um, uh, we're going to get almonds. An almond, one almond for every single flower that you have here. So we have this many flowers here. We're going to get at maximum this many almonds. We're not going to get more almonds than the flowers. We will probably get less because some of the flowers will go to waste. So why would this plant go through this tremendous energy expenditure to make these flowers before it makes the leaves, after starving for 6 months? This is a question. And the reason is competition. Because it's one of the few trees to make, or plants to make flowers at this time of the year. You can see another one just behind me. It's the famous forsythia. It's one of the earliest flowering plants in a garden, decorative plant, not a fruit making plant. That's that. But aside from this one and the yellow one, there's pretty much nothing else that's flowering in the garden. You can see some green, you can see some bare things, but there's nothing else that makes flowers. So this means that this guy, this little almond tree that's been starving for 6 months, has an advantage. And what's the advantage? If a bee flies by and sees this flower, it's going to go for sure to this flower because it has no competition. The bee has also emerged after the long winter. It is starving as well. And you are going to bet that as soon as it sees this marvelous little flower, it's going to go here and pollinate the flower. Um, so So our lesson is that certain kinds of trees that include the almond, the cherry, the apple, the apricot, etc., certain families of trees, they put themselves through a tremendous energy expenditure just at the beginning of the spring in order to have a competitive advantage with all the other plants and in order to get the bees early and start making the fruits before everyone else. So that is the objective and that is the strategy. Now, what is the danger? This is not just all benefits. What is the danger of this strategy? The danger of this strategy is this: after you've spent all this time making all this energy, making all these beautiful things, because we're still in very early spring, we're in the beginning of April, and we are in the mountains, in the high mountains, you can have a spring storm or or what's called a spring killing frost. So all of a sudden temperatures can go down. And these little delicate flowers, they're not equipped to deal with freezing weather. This is the weakness of this particular strategy. So this little tree that thinks it's so smart to have outsmarted everyone else to make flowers before it makes leaves so that it catches all the bees and the other insects that pollinating insects. When I say bees, I mean pollinating insects. The disadvantage is that if we get a frost or a snowstorm or any kind of really cold weather, all these flowers are going to die, and therefore this tree will not be able to make any children whatsoever this season. And its children would have been almonds, but in the other case would be apples and whatever, and they would all be gone because it only gets one chance to make one set of flowers every year, and that's in the spring. So when you hear sometimes that in the spring there was unseasonably cold weather and the farmers lost all their crop, this is what has happened. They were farming some kind of fruit trees like these almonds. They had the bad fortune to have a late cold, and it wiped out all the flowers. And as soon as the flowers are wiped out, so is your crop for the year. So you're not going to get any almonds this year. This happens often. And happens often, especially when you live in mountainous situations like this one. Last year, for example, we had no apples at all because exactly that happened. So now you know a few things about the different strategies that different plants have, and also the pitfalls of these particular strategies. So let's hope for this little almond tree that so bravely and so beautifully made its bunch of flowers that we're not going to get a killing frost, and come September you'll find me in another video right here picking up the almonds from exactly these branches. Take care. Noma Dimitri from the Alpine Garden.